In this video, Sosua versus Cartagena. Which is better? Hey, in this video, guys, I am going to talk to you about which is a safer destination for you. Sosua versus Cartagena. And obviously, also, the Dominican Republic versus Colombia. Please stay tuned. Now, a lot of people just assume that Colombia is more dangerous than the Dominican Republic. And I have to admit that statistically that is true. Colombia has a higher murder rate than the Dominican Republic does. But that said, if you actually compare the touristy areas of Colombia, the places where you are most likely to go as a tourist, and the Dominican Republic, those are overwhelmingly the safest areas for you to be, both in the Dominican Republic and Colombia. And if you go out of those areas, if you venture into areas in the Dominican Republic where you should not be, just like in Colombia, then you know what? You are much more likely to have something happen to you. And, for example, I knew men who went to Sosua on a regular basis. A couple of African-American guys. One was a police officer from New York and another was a lawyer. And they did not even want to go to Santo Domingo. This one guy who was, a cop said to me, he said, I've heard horror stories about Santo Domingo. And let me tell you, I had an apartment in Santo Domingo, with my Dominican girlfriend. And I spent a lot of time mostly in the Zona Colonial, which is, the safest part of Santo Domingo for tourists. And, but, if you're in one of those other neighborhoods, like where I had an apartment, like we went to a club one night that was not very far away. And, we did not walk home. Oh, no, we didn't not even want to walk 3 or 4 blocks. We had a friend from the club, drive us right up to the front door. And so, so really the question is, while Colombia is more dangerous and has a higher murder rate than the Dominican Republic, non-touristy areas of the Dominican Republic and non-touristy areas of Colombia are extremely dangerous. Now, I would say that Colombia is probably more dangerous than the Dominican Republic. But, in my time in Sosua, I have seen people get things snatched from them in the middle of the day. I had some guy tell me he got robbed once at night walking home. When I first arrived at Hotel Europa, one of the first times I went, the woman at the desk said to me, when you go out, do not bring your passport, do not bring extra money, do not wear chains or jewelry, and basically, this is, the how you need to behave if you want to spend time anywhere in Latin America, okay? And so basically, if you want to, be in Brazil or, anywhere else, Mexico, it's the same routine, okay? So you go out at night, especially, you don't bring anything you don't want to bring with you, When I would spend time in the Dominican Republic and Colombia and I would go out at night, I would basically be prepared. I mean, look, if I'm in the old city of Cartagena, I'm not that worried about it, but there were times when I went out at night in Santo Domingo. And let me tell you, Santo Domingo can be a very dangerous city, especially if you're out of touristy areas. And the touristy areas, it's, pretty much safe 24/7 for the most part. I mean, if you're out very late, you always have to be careful, whether you're in the touristy areas or not, But But if you go out at night, you should be prepared to get robbed. And let me just say, in 7 or 8 years of spending a lot of time in Latin America, I've spent time in Costa Rica, in the Dominican Republic, in Colombia, and I have never been robbed or anything, okay? But, I also was raised in New York City, and, I have a certain level of street smarts that, I'm very aware of what's going on around me. I'm not walking around with headphones on listening to music, you know. It's, you need to have street smarts and be aware when you are in places. And, your demeanor says a lot to people. Should I rob this guy or shouldn't I rob this guy? Don't be, make sure you are walking and you're clearly what's going on around you. Even during the day when I'm walking in Cartagena, if somebody is walking too close to me, if I think somebody is following me, I'm paying attention to all of this. And let me tell you, they're not. But you know what? I'm paying attention anyway. So you want to spend time in Latin America, you need to have a certain amount of street smarts and be aware of what's going on around you. And so, that's something you need to pay attention to if you want to spend time in Latin America. And in many ways, Sosua and Cartagena are very similar as far as safety goes. If you go across the bridge, for example, in both Sosua and Cartagena, in the wrong direction, you know what? You are someplace that as a tourist and a gringo, you should not be, especially at night. Okay? Cartagena became more dangerous after the pandemic because a lot of people were left jobless and crime went up after the pandemic was done. And so before the pandemic and during the pandemic, Cartagena was safer. But again, the only things that really happen now in the touristy areas really are kind of like chain snatching and things like that. Which again, if you didn't wear a chain, they wouldn't snatch it. Okay, so you want to go out with your Rolex and it gets snatched, well, it got snatched because you wore it. Okay, so don't go out at night with your Rolex, and really you shouldn't go out during the day with your Rolex. Okay, so you have to understand, in Latin America, bling attracts attention, but it attracts the wrong kind of attention. The kind of attention you don't want unless you want trouble. Now, I have had apartments in the Dominican Republic and Colombia in both touristy areas and non-touristy areas. And let me tell you, in the non-touristy areas, the way you operate is, if you want to go out at night, you wait in your apartment for an Uber or a taxi. And when he texts you and says, I'm here at the door, you go out and get in the car. Okay? You do not wait on the street. You do not walk around. In the early evening hours, it may not be so bad, but, later in the evening, you definitely do not want to be out on the street. You're asking for trouble, both in the non-touristy areas of both the Dominican Republic and Colombia. Now, I mostly stay now in the old city of Cartagena or in Boca Grande. And again, I'm not a guy who's out till 2, 3, 4 in the morning usually. But, there have been times when I've gone out clubbing with friends and walked home at 1 or 2 in the morning. And, in the old city, for the most part, it's fine. Yes, it is definitely more dangerous than it was before the pandemic, but, So I would say to anybody who has fears about coming to Cartagena, I would say if you're in the touristy areas and you behave in a smart way, then, for the most part, it's very unlikely anything is going to happen to you. Okay?